There are stories buried in America's old frontier that were never meant to be found. Sealed under sand, silence, and the kind of fear that reshapes a whole community. But every so often, something slips through the cracks, something that refuses to stay forgotten. And in the winter of 1887, that something was bone. 97 female skeletons, discovered by railroad workers digging through the frozen Nevada desert, hidden beneath what remained of the Golden Rose Saloon. Every skeleton showed the exact same signs of violence, so precise, so deliberate, that the 3 officers assigned to investigate requested transfers within days, unable to cope with what they had witnessed. Their final territorial report was sealed immediately and left untouched for more than a century. Only recently, with the release of long-buried documents, has the truth come into focus. The truth about the Everhart sisters. For women who ran the most organized, methodical killing enterprise the American frontier had ever seen. Make sure to subscribe to the Forgotten Liturgy and hit that notification bell so you never miss stories like this. Drop a comment and tell me what state you're listening from. I love knowing where our audience discovers these forgotten chapters of American history. What made this case so chilling wasn't just the scale of the violence, but the simplicity of it. For nearly 10 years, the Everhart sisters operated without suspicion, hidden behind the chaos of frontier life, shielded by corrupt officials and enriched by a criminal network that would be worth millions in today's currency. To understand how they did it, we have to go back to Silver Creek, Nevada, a town that rose from nothing in 1868, when prospector Jacob Steinberg stumbled onto a glittering silver vein deep in the barren hills. Steinberg discovered it during a rare winter storm, seeking shelter in a shallow cave where the rock walls shimmered with metal. Wittenmont's canvas tents grew into wooden streets, and by 1870 Silver Creek boasted nearly 4,000 people, mostly men chasing fortune in a land where summer heat scorched above 100 degrees and winter nights froze the ground solid. The town's isolation worked in its favor during the silver boom. Law enforcement was a day's hard ride away, beyond treacherous mountain passes. Territorial officials rarely bothered to visit. Intatbacum Silver Creek became a place where people could reinvent themselves or disappear completely. The silver dollar mine, the lifeblood of the town, ran day and night. Over 800 workers descended into shafts reaching 600 feet underground. Explosions, machinery, smoke. Dust. Silver Creek lived in a permanent haze where strange odors and distant screams could blend into the background. It was the perfect town for secrets. Main Street stretched nearly 3/4 of a mile, a mix of rough saloons and sturdier businesses. The Silver Creek General Store, run by a German immigrant named Heinrich Müller, served as the unofficial town center, and later, a crucial source of information when women began disappearing. Women were rare in Silver Creek, nearly 30 men for every woman. A single, respectable woman could command extraordinary attention. That scarcity shaped the town's social structure and, later, gave the Everhart sisters the opening they needed. Respectable women were treated with exaggerated courtesy, and no one questioned the Everhart sisters when they arrived in the spring of 1870. They came on the weekly supply wagon from Carson City, traveling light chests, a few worn trunks, and a leather satchel containing letters of introduction. They said they planned to open a respectable boarding house for working women. The town welcomed them without suspicion. Greta Everhart, the eldest at 32, led the group, tall nearly 5'8", with striking auburn hair pinned in an Eastern style and sharp green eyes that studied everyone she met. Her gloved hands and polished manner marked her as someone from a privileged background, though she always avoided questions about her past. Wilhelmina, 30, handled the money. Pale blonde hair, meticulous posture, sharp blue eyes that missed nothing. Quiet, but intimidating in her precision. Margot, 28, served as the face of the operation, warm, approachable, seemingly compassionate. She spoke a concern about the hardships faced by women out west, earning trust easily, which made her perfect for luring victims. And Adelaide, the youngest at 25, was the beauty, golden hair, cornflower blue eyes, and an air of innocence that disarmed nearly every man she met. Her charm made their establishment appear respectable. Her presence made people feel safe, and that was exactly what the sisters needed. Despite Adelaide's youthful charm, anyone who challenged her roar interfered with the sisters' growing enterprise quickly learned that beneath her soft voice was a will sharp enough to cut. Those who crossed her described the same thing: a sudden shift, a hardening behind the eyes, and an icy determination that matched her older sisters in every way. By early summer of 1870, the Everhart sisters had already made their first strategic move. They rented a massive 3-story building at the far end of Main Street, a structure that had once housed Herman Goldstein's ill-fated mercantile business, built from thick pine with a deep stone foundation, one that reached farther underground than any other structure in town. The building offered more than 5,000 square feet across its floors, plus a sprawling basement carved out during Goldstein's original construction. The sisters paid an entire year's rent up front. No one in Silver Creek did that. Their landlord, banker Samuel Rothschild, wrote in his diary that he had never encountered tenants with such resources or such confidence. Within 2 months, the Everharts transformed the abandoned structure into the Golden Rose refined boarding house and restaurant. At least on the surface, the renovation was extravagant for a frontier town. Imported laced curtains from San Francisco to second-hand pianos purchased from collapsing hotels, elegant furnishings, gas lighting throughout, and an impressive in-house library that amazed visitors accustomed to saloons and card tables. The first floor became a respectable social space for Silver Creek's scattered female population mine. Foremen's wives like Martha Kowalski and Sarah O'Brien, the schoolteacher, Miss Catherine Petan, seamstresses, shopkeepers, wives, and the occasional woman traveling from the east. Clean rooms, polished floors, good food, fair prices. Golden Rose quickly earned a reputation as the safest, most civilized place a woman could stay in the Nevada desert. But that was only the beginning. Residents soon noticed little oddities, movements. Visitors, deliverers that hinted the building served more than one purpose. And they were right. The second floor, reachable by a separate entrance hidden from Main Street, housed Silver Creek's most exclusive brothel. Unlike the gaudy, lantern-lit saloons scattered along the main strip, the upstairs rooms of the Golden Rose looked like they belonged in San Francisco or Denver. 10 luxurious suites with imported furniture, silk wallpaper, thick carpets, crystal lamps, private wash basins, and even miniature libraries. The clientele consisted of the town's wealthy elitemen who appreciated both discretion and luxury. The third floor, which the sisters claimed were their private living quarters, served a different function entirely. This was where newly recruited young women stayed, women who answered the sisters' carefully crafted employment ads, women who would soon become indispensable to the Everhart operation, and then, without warning, disappear. The first documented disappearance occurred in late August of 1810, 3 months after the sisters arrived in Silver Creek. That summer had been brutally hot, the desert air shimmering with 90-degree heat, even at dusk. It was during this brief break in the weather that Maria Fernandez, a 19-year-old from Carson City, came seeking a better life. She responded to an advertisement promising steady wages, comfortable accommodations, an opportunity for advancement, everything she needed to support her struggling family. Maria's life in Carson City had been defined by hardship. Her father, Diego, picked up day labor whenever work was available, but anti-Mexican prejudice made jobs scarce. Her mother, Elena, suffered from a worsening cough that required medicine the family couldn't afford, and Maria's 4 younger siblings depended on whatever income she could earn. The advertisement, written with calculated care by Margot Everhart, the sisters skilled in persuasion, ran in the Carson City Daily Appeal on July 20th, 1870. Its promise of respectable domestic work sounded almost too good to be true. Domestic service in a reputable boarding house within a prosperous mining community. Room, board, and competitive wages provided. Excellent opportunities for advancement. Maria applied immediately. Father Miguel Santos, a local priest, helped her translate her letter into English. She described her skills, her experience running her family's household, and her desire to work hard to support her ailing mother. Margos's response, dated August 1st, was warm, encouraging, and impeccably manipulative, exactly the tone that had lured dozens of young women before Maria. She was offered $4 per week, nearly double the typical wage for Mexican-American domestic workers. The letter assured her that she would be met at Heinrich Muller's general store, that a clean room awaited her, and that she would be cared for as part of a respectable household. But the letter asked for something else, something the sisters asked of every recruit. Details about her family's financial situation, her father's employment, her mother's health, and most critically whether anyone expected regular communication from her. Maria arrived at the Golden Rose in early August. Her first letters home were hopeful, full of gratitude. She praised her comfortable room, the kindness of the sisters, the relative ease of her work. She cleaned rooms, cooked meals, and served the female residents' work, respectable enough to quiet any concerns. But small details in those letters' hesitations, subtle shifts in tone would later reveal just how carefully the Everhart sisters were tightening their grip around her life. Maria's early letters home had sounded hopeful, but the tone changed quickly. Her later letters revealed a quiet confusion, tales that investigators would later realize were warnings. She wrote that Adelaide had begun asking strange and overly personal questions: how much money the family had, whether her father had steady work, her mother's medical issues, even who in Carson City expected letters from her. Adelaide claimed it was all for employment records, but the questions were far too intrusive for a domestic job. In her September 2nd letter, Maria mentioned something even more troubling. The sisters were limiting her communication, telling her she could write home only once every 2 weeks because her letters interfered with duties and cost too much postage. She also said she had been moved from her warm third-floor room to a tiny windowless basement room, supposedly to make space for a new guest, though she never saw anyone new arrive. At night, she heard strange sounds echoing through the basement. Adelaide dismissed them as rats or settling wood, but the noises left her uneasy. Maria also mentioned meeting 2 young women whom she thought were fellow employees, but she was ordered not to speak to them. They were being trained for special duties that required complete isolation. That letter, dated September 12th, would be her last. When weeks passed, with no further messages, her father Diego Fernandez spent nearly all his savings to travel 3 days by wagon to Silver Creek. At the Golden Rose, the sisters met him with sympathy, but their story broke apart the longer he questioned them. Greta, speaking through translator Heinrich Muller, claimed Maria had left for San Francisco after receiving a surprising offer of $8 a week, far more than a maid could usually earn. She presented a farewell note allegedly written by Maria, but Diego saw details that felt wrong. The paper appeared artificially aged. The ink didn't match Maria's usual letters, and the sisters' explanations didn't line up. They said she left before dawn to avoid the heat, yet somehow had time to pack, collect her wages, and say goodbyes without waking anyone. Margot insisted she personally saw Maria off, yet couldn't describe the wealthy family who supposedly hired her. Soon after, another young woman disappeared under nearly the same circumstances. Charlotte Weber, a 22-year-old German immigrant seamstress, reached the Golden Rose after answering one of the sisters' carefully worded advertisements. She fit the profile perfectly: alone, struggling, vulnerable. Her parents and younger brother had died of cholera during their Atlantic crossing, leaving her without family or protection in a foreign country where she barely spoke the language. She managed to survive in Virginia City as a seamstress, but when the economy declined, her work dried up. Days before eviction, she saw the advertisement promising respectable domestic work. It seemed like salvation. Between 1871 and 1872, women like Charlotte continued to arrive in hopeful and desperate, and they continued disappearing. The Everhart sisters had perfected a recruitment system built on precision and manipulation. Greta coordinated their strategy and kept local officials complacent. Wilhelmina managed the records and handled stolen property. Margot corresponded with potential victims, knowing exactly what to say to win their trust. And Adelaide controlled the final stage: confinement, silence, and death. Their advertisements reached newspapers across the West Nevada, California, Colorado, Utah, always polite, always promising opportunity, and always vague enough to avoid questions. They maintained multiple P.O. boxers in major cities to appear like an established organization. Margot's letters were tailored with remarkable psychological insight. Gentle appeals to duty for women supporting families, promises of refinement for those longing for status, and warm assurances of safety for those escaping hardship. It was a machinery built to harvest human hope, efficiently, and without leaving a trace. Margot's letters had always sounded warm and inviting on the surface, but beneath the charm lay a darker level of calculation. Every initial exchange was designed to extract information that would determine whether a young woman could vanish without raising alarms. She asked about family ties, financial struggles, local connections, language skills, and even handwriting habits that became tools for deciding who could be easily silenced and whose disappearance might trigger unwanted attention. Women with large families, established reputations, or influential friends rarely heard back. But those who appeared isolated, desperate, or icily controlled were invited almost immediately. Upon arrival, new recruits were treated with disarming warmth. They were given comfortable rooms on the 3rd floor, fed well, and assigned light duties that made the Golden Rose seem like a rare sanctuary in the unforgiving West. This pleasant beginning served a chilling purpose. It lulled each woman into trust, while giving the sisters time to study her weaknesses, map her relationships, and observe her daily habits. For weeks, sometimes months, the sisters gathered intimate details under the guise of sisterly conversation. They listened to confessions about broken families, dreams of better lives, fears of failure, and the exhaustion of constantly trying to survive. Every laugh, every worry, every hope became a data point stored meticulously in Wilhelmina's private records. Those records would later horrify investigators. Each victim had her own file, documenting handwriting samples, vocabulary, speech patterns, family details, insecurities, and future plans. The sisters didn't just kill their victims, they replaced them professionally. They forged letters that seemed heartbreakingly real, mimicking each woman's writing so perfectly that families believed their daughter had simply moved on. That illusion of contentment was no accident. The sisters were patient. They waited until regular correspondence established a pattern of normalcy, until letters home reassured families that everything was fine. Only then, once suspicions had faded, did the sisters act. By 1873, the Golden Rose had become one of the most respected establishments in Silver Creek, at least on the outside. Women arrived constantly, searching for work or refuge, and just as steadily, others were said to have left for brighter futures elsewhere. In a time when people moved frequently across the frontier, when a letter could take weeks to arrive or never arrive at all, the constant turnover seemed normal, almost expected. Those few who raised concerns found themselves silenced by Sheriff Caleb Harrison, a man whose uniform masked the deep corruption beneath it. Harrison had become one of the Golden Rose's most loyal customers, enjoying the luxuries of its forbidden 2nd-floor brothel. The sisters rewarded him with expensive whiskey, cigars, and envelopes of cash. Far beyond his official means, in return, he dismissed every worried inquiry from families. A missing daughter. She must have taken a job in another city. A sudden end. 2 letters home. Postal delays. Nothing more. In his official reports, when he bothered to write them, he always concluded that women left voluntarily. No foul play suspected. Their influence spread farther still. Hingrich, owner of the general store, profited handsomely from the sisters' constant purchases of rare and expensive supplies. His silence was bought not with bribes, but with steady business. And then there was Dr. Elias Hoffman, the man investigators would later call the sisters' most disturbing ally. Hoffman's past was stained long before he arrived in Silver Creek. A revoked medical license in Pennsylvania, rumors of illegal procedures, narcotics supplied without cause, and sickening whispers about experiments on vulnerable patients. The Everhart sisters learned of his shameful history and used it as leverage. In exchange for protection and a place in the community, Hoffman provided medical cover stories, signed false certificates, and ensured no medical questions ever threatened the Golden Rose. By 1874, their empire of deceit had become a well-oiled killing machine. The sisters maintained the outward image of refined women serving their community, while behind closed doors, their operation functioned with the efficiency of a thriving business, one built on the calculated disappearance of vulnerable women. Their corruption seeped into every corner of Silver Creek's power structure, ensuring that any questions, any potential threats, dissolved before they could grow dangerous. And as their operation expanded, so did their network of accomplices, though few understood the true nature of what they were part of. Tom Brennan, a former convict with a violent past, worked nights digging secluded pits under the pretense of building new privies or drainage tunnels. His size and strength made him useful, and his tendency to avoid questions made him perfect. Samuel Garrett, a wagon driver, unknowingly helped dispose of belongings stolen from the dead Vernie. Closey Thames, the sisters claimed, had been left behind by employees who moved on. In the eyes of Silver Creek, the Everhart sisters remained charming, respectable businesswomen. In reality, they had built a silent factory of death hidden in plain sight, protected by fear, greed, and the blind trust of a town that never imagined four refined women could be capable of such monstrous precision. Garrett's simple reputation made him the perfect middleman, allowing him to sell the sisters' items in faraway markets where no one questioned their origins. The extra money they paid him kept him obedient, and he never wondered why they always had so many women's clothes, jewelry, and personal belongings to get rid of, or why every exchange had to be done in secrecy. By this time, the sisters' method of choosing victims had become disturbingly calculated. They focused on women with weak family ties, limited resources, poor English, or backgrounds that made them easy to silence and unlikely to be searched for. Mexican and Chinese immigrant women were especially vulnerable because local authorities barely cared when they disappeared. The sisters also preyed on women fleeing abuse, those with criminal pasts, and anyone whose family lived too far away to ask questions quickly. As more families began sending letters to the Golden Rose asking about missing daughters and sisters, the women already had a response system ready. Using handwriting samples collected from former employees, they forged farewell notes and created believable stories about new jobs, sudden romances, or opportunities that supposedly lured the victims away. Vilmina kept meticulous records that treated human lives like business assets, noting each woman's arrival, background, estimated value, method of death, and the profit made from her belongings. She even tracked how families reacted to disappearance reports so they could adjust their lives when necessary. Meanwhile, the basement beneath the Golden Rose had transformed into a secret underground labyrinth. Expanded by Tom Brennan's nighttime digging, it stretched beneath the alley and into natural caves. What outsiders believed was storage space was actually a system of rooms designed for imprisonment, murder, and inventory. Victims' belongings were sorted like goods in a warehouse. Valuable items kept for sale, while sentimental items were preserved as trophies. Nearby rooms were soundproofed and fitted with restraints and drainage systems to hide every trace of violence happening below the surface. During this period, the sisters expanded their crimes beyond murder. Using Grida's intelligence and Adelaide's innocent appearance, they gathered secrets from wealthy mine owners, railroad executives, and built a powerful blackmail network. Sheriff Harrison's indifference toward missing persons became clear when investigators later discovered the sisters had documented his gambling debts, drinking, affairs, and frequent visits to their upstairs rooms. Dozens of other influential men were trapped in similar compromising situations, ensuring that no one dared investigate them too closely. Their criminal network extended to cities like San Francisco, Denver, and Salt Lake City, where partners helped sell stolen goods, provide forged documents, and send new victims to Silver Creek under false promises. But in early 1876, the sisters made the mistake that would unravel everything. They chose Rose Macabre. Unlike their usual victims, Rose was educated, confident, and disciplined, with strong family ties and relatives in Boston who wrote to her often. She had worked as a governess for wealthy families and knew how to handle authority. Her disappearance would spark immediate alarm, and her family had both the connections and resources to demand answers. She responded to one of the sisters' deceptive advertisements in the Sacramento Daily Union, unaware that her detailed, articulate application letter should have disqualified her entirely. Yet the sisters, blinded by ambition, ignored every warning. Sinan sealed their own downfall. Rose's application had made her strengths unmistakably clear. She could teach reading, writing, arithmetic, and social etiquette. She could manage household staff, and she spoke both English and Gaelic, making her valuable to immigrant families. She also described her large, tightly connected family in Boston, her frequent letters to relatives across the country, and her intention to return east once she had saved enough to build a respectable future. These details alone should have warned the Everhart sisters to stay away from her. But by 1876, Their success and the steady 6-year stream of victims had made them reckless. They believed no woman, no matter. Her background was beyond their control. Within days of receiving Rose's application, Margot eagerly wrote back on February 1st, offering generous wages and room and board. The invitation praised educated women and described the Golden Rose as a refined frontier establishment that needed her skills. It was persuasive enough that Rose, despite hesitation about the remote location, accepted and arrived in mid-February. Almost immediately, she noticed what others had either ignored or were too vulnerable to question. Her intelligence, confidence, and strong family ties gave her the ability and the motivation to pay attention to things that didn't add up. The building contained rooms that were always locked, despite the sisters' claims that they stored supplies or equipment. Whenever Rose offered to help organize or clean them behavior, typical of her work as a Govanisti, sisters grew tense and insisted she leave those areas alone. At night, strange sounds drifted from the basement. These weren't the everyday noises of an aging building, but intentional movements, muffled voices, and what sounded like digging or construction, always happening between midnight and dawn. When Rose mentioned them casually, Adelaide nervously blamed rats or heating pipes, excuses far too weak for someone of Rose's awareness. What alarmed her most were the belongings. Hidden in closets and storage rooms were valuable personal items from women who had supposedly left Silver Creek to pursue new opportunities. Items no woman would ever abandon voluntarily. There were family lockets, inscribed prayer books, sewing tools, medical instruments, and heartfelt letters from relatives who were growing worried about lost contact. In a detailed letter to her sister Margaret on March 10th, Rose described these items and her suspicion that the Golden Rose's outward respectability concealed something profoundly sinister. She noted that she had counted the belongings of at least 20 women, yet had witnessed only 3 departures since arriving. The sisters' explanations simply didn't match reality. Unlike previous victims, Rose asked direct questions. When Greta claimed that a former worker, Sarah Jenkins, had rushed to Denver to marry a wealthy merchant, Rose pointed out that Sarah's best dress still hung in her room. Her savings were untouched under her mattress. Her gold-crossed heirloom she had sworn never to part with remained nailed beside her bed. Sarah had even told Rose she was saving money to bring her younger sister Wes. The idea that she would abandon her savings and heirloom because of a sudden romance was absurd. Greta's flimsy story didn't just raise doubt, it solidified Rose's fear that something terrible had happened to Sarah. Her suspicions sharpened when she noticed Dr. Hoffman's late-night visits. From her third-floor room, Rose could see the side entrance clearly, and she documented the doctor arriving 3 times a week between midnight and dawn, always heading straight to the basement with his medical bag and extra equipment. This was not normal care for sick residents or routine medical visits. When Rose asked Wilhelmina about it with genuine concern and an offer to help nurse whoever might be yield, Sister panicked and gave contradictory explanations. First, she claimed a woman with consumption was isolated downstairs, then abruptly changed her story, saying the woman had already recovered and left for a sanitarium in Colorado. The inconsistency revealed what Rose was beginning to understand. The Everhart sisters were losing their ability to maintain their lies, and Rose, educated, observant, and unafraid, was becoming a threat. It couldn't easily silence. Later that week, when Rose casually asked why she had never seen any patient rooms in the basement, Wilhelmina produced yet another explanation that Dr. Hoffman treated women from the town's red light district who needed discreet care away from respectable eyes. The excuse sounded more realistic than the others, but Rose couldn't ignore the fact that she never once saw a single woman arrive or leave during the doctor's late-night visits. That contradiction stayed with her, building toward a breaking point. In the early morning darkness of March 18, 1876, Rose finally acted on her suspicions. After the household quieted and the sisters retreated to their rooms, she slipped downstairs to examine a concealed door she had seen Dr. Hoffman use. It was hidden behind stored furniture near the main staircase, and unlike the areas she had previously explored, this entrance led to a part of the basement she had never been allowed to see. What she found beyond that door nearly sealed her fate. A steep staircase descended into an expanded underworld carved far past the building's original foundations. The chambers she entered were small, cold, and horrifying, each fitted with heavy chains, iron floor rings, and drainage channels that left no doubt about their intended purpose. The smell of decay lingered even beneath layers of lime and chemicals. The air felt thick enough to choke on, and for the first time Rose understood the magnitude of the evil beneath the Golden Rose. In the largest room, she found what could only be described as a warehouse of death. Women's clothing, jewelry, shoes, and intimate belongings were neatly organized as if waiting to be sold. These weren't forgotten items from careless travelers. They were the possessions of dozens of missing women, carefully harvested and preserved. Among them were photographs, lockets, prayer books, and sentimental treasures no woman would ever abandon willingly. Each item told the story of a life cut short. When Rose stumbled upon ledgers written in Wilhelmina's tidy handwriting, the full horror came into view. The books listed victims by arrival date, accounted for their belongings, recorded the profit from each murder, and even tracked expenses for disposing of bodies and bribing officials. Most chilling were the notes about families who questioned, who accepted the lies, who needed further manipulation, and who required intimidation to silence. The records proved that the sisters had murdered women systematically for nearly 6 years, while maintaining a network that stretched across the West, involving accomplices from San Francisco to Salt Lake City who helped sell stolen goods, forge documents, and craft plausible stories. Rose also found correspondence outlining plans to expand the operation to other mining towns, turning Silver Creek into a model for future sites. The sisters were preparing to replicate their system of deception and murder across multiple territories. Realizing the scale of the conspiracy, Rose knew she needed to escape immediately. The next day, on March 19th, she mailed a letter to her sister Margaret from Carson City, a safer distance from the sisters' watchful eyes. In the letter, she revealed only what she dared, warning that she had uncovered something so horrible. She feared writing the full truth, in case the message was intercepted. She described underground chambers, evidence of systematic murder, and detailed records that treated human beings like inventory. She vowed to deliver everything she knew to territorial authorities as soon as she reached safety. But escaping Silver Creek required more than courage. It required deception. Rose understood that a sudden departure would alert the sisters and mark her for immediate elimination. Her intelligence, education, and family connections made her a dangerous witness one. They could not afford to let go if they sensed her suspicions. So she created a believable reason to leave. She claimed to have received urgent news from Heinrich Müller's general store that her grandmother in Boston had fallen gravely ill and needed her help. To reinforce the story, she asked Müller to send a telegram to her family requesting confirmation, though the real purpose was to alert them that she was in danger and fleeing for her life. The air inside the Golden Rose felt heavier than usual. The morning rose. McGillicuddy announced her departure. She had crafted her escape with meticulous care, even forging a telegram that supposedly came from her family in Boston. Using her knowledge of her relatives' writing habits and personal circumstances, she composed a message claiming her grandmother had fallen gravely ill and that urgent family business required her immediate return. She showed the telegram to all 4 Everhart sisters, and though her performance was convincing, the reactions were far from what she expected. Instead of the sympathy they typically express toward departing employees, the sisters responded with a tense mix of agitation and suspicion, pressing her with probing questions about her grandmother's condition, her family's finances, her plans to return, and whether she intended to speak about her experiences at the Golden Rose. More disturbingly, they insisted on searching her belongings before she left, pretending it was a routine check to ensure she hadn't packed anything belonging to the establishment. Their fixation on her correspondence, notes, and personal items made it clear they feared she had uncovered something dangerous, something that could unravel everything. Rosa's escape became the spark that ignited the largest criminal investigation in the history of the Nevada Territory. After reaching Carson City, she gave a detailed testimony to Territorial Marshal James Hartwell, a former Union Army colonel known for his discipline and integrity. She brought with her the physical evidence she had smuggled out: records, notes, and other items hidden in her luggage, and her sworn deposition painted the first complete picture of the Everhart sisters' monstrous operation. She described the secret basement chambers, the cold precision of the ledgers documenting each victim, the network of accomplices spanning multiple territories, and the methodical process used to select women whose disappearances would raise a little immediate alarm. She explained how corruption, social prejudice, and calculated manipulation had allowed the sisters to operate undisturbed for nearly 6 years. Her testimony was not just a witness, accounted was a roadmap to decades of hidden horrors. On April 15, 1876, Hartwell arrived in Silver Creek with 12 deputies, 2 territorial judges, 3 physicians trained in forensic examination, and a court stenographer. Their arrival signaled the beginning of a full-scale operation. The Everhart sisters attempted to maintain their usual composure, but the facade cracked almost immediately. Greta, normally the most controlled and calculating of the 4, became visibly shaken when presented with the search warrant, trying to negotiate limits and stall the investigation. Wilhelmina panicked outright, scrambling to hide or destroy business records under the flimsy excuse of protecting their financial privacy, only drawing further suspicion. Margot and Adelaide attempted charm and innocence, but their nervous chatter, contradictions, and evasive answers only deepened the investigators' doubts. Nothing, however, prepared the team for what they found beneath the Golden Rose. What had been described as storage rooms and guest quarters revealed themselves as a labyrinth of underground prison cells, each one crafted for confinement, torture, and death. Heavy chains, shackles, blood-draining systems, soundproofed walls, and suffocating ventilation traps filled the chambers. The stench of death clung to the air so thickly that seasoned lawmen grew ill, forcing them to rotate in short shifts, and deeper still hidden behind false walls. They uncovered rooms crammed with the personal possessions of nearly 100 victims. Jewelry, clothing, tools, and keepsakes were meticulously catalogued as though they were inventory in a macabre marketplace. Every item represented a stolen life, a woman who never left Silver Creek, a story silenced beneath the Everhart's cruelty. The deeper investigator searched within the Golden Rose, the more the human tragedy revealed itself in heartbreaking detail. In rooms that should never have existed, they found religious objects from every corner of the world: crucifixes, prayer books, Jewish ritual items, and Islamic prayer beads, proof of the diverse women who had passed through Silver Creek, seeking hope only to meet horror. Even more devastating were the personal mementos. Family photographs carefully tucked into satchels, faded letters from loved ones, children's drawings carried as reminders of home, and small keepsakes meant to bring comfort on long journeys. Each item represented a bond severed. A life stolen, a story silenced forever. The most damning evidence, however, came from the sisters' own meticulous records. Hidden ledgers many, written in Wilhelmina, precise. Handwriting documented the entire operation with the cold efficiency of a commercial enterprise. Investigators uncovered entries accounting for 97 murders, each victim recorded with chilling detail. Names, ages, backgrounds, dates of arrival, estimated value of possessions, family ties, likelihood of being missed, method of murder, and profits generated through resale were all catalogued as if the Everhart sisters were managing a thriving business rather than orchestrating mass murder. Alongside these entries were extensive notes describing how victims were selected, revealing a calculated preference for immigrant women with limited English, those from poor families unlikely to mount a search, and those whose complicated circumstances made their disappearances tragically believable. Even more horrifying were the sisters' detailed notes on killing techniques, the result of years of experimentation. They documented poisons obtained through Dr. Hoffman, methods for restraining victims without leaving signs of struggle, and procedures for disposing of bodies in ways that would erase identities if remains were ever found. Their system resembled an assembly line of death, with each sister specializing in a different task, refining their methods like craftsmen perfecting a trade. The investigation soon uncovered an extensive network of accomplices, reaching far beyond Silver Creek. Letters and coded correspondences revealed partnerships with jewel fences operating in distant cities, document forgers supplying false identities, corrupt officials in neighboring towns helping funnel vulnerable women toward the Golden Rose, and even other criminal groups with similar operations across the territories. Every discovery widened the scope of the conspiracy and emphasized just how long the sisters had remained hidden in plain sight. Dr. Elias Hoffman's involvement proved even darker than expected. His medical knowledge had shaped the sisters' killing techniques, ensuring that certain deaths could be mistaken for natural causes. Investigators found journals in his home filled with grotesque notes on the effects of poisons, mechanical methods of death, and surgical procedures designed to obscure identification. He had personally performed mutilations intended to erase distinguishing features from victims, a final act of cruelty meant to deny families any chance of closure. Then came the desert graves. Information extracted from the sisters' documents in Hoffman's journals led investigators to remote burial sites dug under the cover of darkness by Tom Brennan. These hidden spots, scattered across the harsh Nevada wilderness, had been chosen for their brutal climate, which accelerated decomposition and reduced the chance of discovery. The sheer extent of these graves forced officials to bring in additional manpower, turning the surrounding desert into a sprawling crime scene that took months to process. By the time the investigation concluded 4 months later, it had grown into one of the most extensive forensic efforts of the century. Dozens of lawmen, physicians, court officials, and specialists worked together to assemble a case so thorough that conviction seemed inevitable. And on September 20th, 1876, the trial of Greta Wilhelmina, Margot, and Adelaide Everhart began in Carson City under Judge William Harrison. The case gripped not just America, but the world, drawing reporters from major newspapers across the U.S. and Europe, all eager to chronicle what was already being called the Silver Creek Massacre and the most organized killing enterprise in American history. The territorial courthouse quickly proved too small, forcing the trial to be moved to the Grand New Opera House, where 800 spectators packed the hall each day. Prosecutors, led by Territorial Attorney General Samuel Morrison and supported by federal experts, faced the immense task of presenting 97 murders without losing the jury's understanding of the sisters' systematic cruelty. Morrison structured the evidence chronologically, revealing how the Everhart operation evolved from isolated killings into a refined machine of death. Scholars would later call the case the most comprehensively documented mass murder prosecution of the 19th century. At the heart of the trial stood Rose McGill, whose testimony brought the courtroom into the depths of the Golden Rose. Her account of the sisters' behavior, their chilling routines, and the horrors she witnessed in the basement chambers provided a human voice to the victims who could no longer speak for themselves. Rose McGillicuddy's observations, reinforced by the evidence she smuggled from the Golden Rose, formed the backbone of the prosecution's understanding of how the Everhart sisters operated with absolute impunity for nearly 6 years. The physical items recovered from the basement belongings tied to each of the 97 documented victims filled entire rooms of the Carson City Opera House, transforming the trial venue into a haunting museum of loss. These artifacts, paired with Wilhelmina's meticulously organized ledgers, revealed the murder enterprise run with the precision of a commercial business. Her records allowed prosecutors to construct exact timelines for every killing, identify the methods used, and calculate the profits extracted from each victim's life and belongings. Dr. Hoffman, arrested alongside the sisters and initially facing execution, agreed to testify in exchange for a sentence of life imprisonment. His testimony illuminated the darkest corners of the case, describing in clinical detail the killing techniques he helped refine, the procedures he used to mask identities, and the network of accomplices who supported the sisters across multiple states. His journals, filled with notes on poisons, mechanical methods of death, and decomposition techniques, demonstrated how the sisters continually improved their process, treating murder as a scientific pursuit and a business necessity. The emotional weight of the trial came from the families who traveled across the American West to speak for those who could no longer speak for themselves. Diego Fernandez, whose daughter Maria was one of the earliest victims, recounted his desperate search for answers and the false comfort offered by the sisters' lies. His story exposed the corruption that had plagued Silver Creek, revealing how officials dismissed grieving families and protected the Everhart operation. Anna Weber, determined to uncover the truth about her sister Charlotte, described the inconsistencies in the sisters' fabricated stories and the complete lack of evidence for the supposed elopement they had invented. Her persistence, along with the testimonies of dozens of others, painted a devastating portrait of a community systematically deceived and silenced. Rose's sister Margaret testified as well, recounting the letter she received describing Rose's rising suspicion and the moment she finally alerted authorities a decision that ultimately saved lives. These testimonies created a powerful cumulative impact, each voice adding depth to the tragedy and revealing the enormous reach of the sisters' crimes. Families came from hundreds of miles away, many at great personal cost, determined to bear witness to the injustice inflicted upon their daughters, mothers, sisters, and wives. Their presence underscored the human toll behind the Everhart sisters' greed. Faced with overwhelming evidence, the sisters' court-appointed attorney, Jeremiah Collins, struggled to mount a plausible defense. He attempted to claim that the brutal realities of frontier life had driven the women to desperate acts of self-defense that spiraled out of control. He argued that the younger sisters had been dominated by Greta, coerced into participating under duress, but these arguments collapsed under the weight of the prosecution's evidence. Handwriting samples showed all 4 sisters making entries in the ledgers, and witnesses testified that each woman played an active role in selecting, manipulating, and murdering their victims. Nothing about their crimes suggested fear or desperation, only methodical calculation and an unquenchable appetite for wealth. Financial evidence uncovered during the investigation revealed the astonishing fortune the sisters had amassed. Hidden caches of money, gold coins, jewelry worth tens of thousands of dollars, and property purchased under forged identities painted the picture of a long-term plan. They had positioned themselves to eventually abandon Silver Creek and reinvent their lives as wealthy, respectable women in distant cities, intending to live in luxury, built entirely on the suffering of others. Their operation, as prosecutors argued, was merely the first stage in a larger plan to secure permanent financial and social status. Testimony from territorial investigators expanded the horrors even further. Their research connected the sisters to disappearances in multiple states: Nevada, California, Colorado, Utah, and beyond, suggesting that the Everharts had been active predators long before settling in Silver Creek. At least 43 additional cases aligned with the sisters' movements, hinting that the true number of victims could exceed 140, though evidence for these earlier crimes was insufficient for formal charges. Still, the pattern was unmistakable. The Everhart sisters had been killing for nearly a decade, leaving a trail of vanished women across the American West. On November 15, 1870, after less than 2 hours of deliberation, the jury returned unanimous guilty verdicts on all counts of first-degree murder. The speed of the decision reflected not only the overwhelming evidence, but the profound moral clarity the jurors felt after weeks of testimony. Judge William Harrison sentenced Greta Wilhelmina and Adelaide Everhart to death by hanging, marking the first time multiple female defendants received capital punishment in the Nevada Territory. It became one of the largest and most consequential mass executions in American criminal history.